donkey tail baby. The sun had set behind the hills, and the small village of Umocho was covered in silence. Mothers were calling their children inside, fires were lit for evening meals, and the smell of roasted yam filled the air. But in the middle of this peaceful night, something unusual was happening. A hunter had returned from the bush with a strange prize, the meat of a donkey. Everyone in the village knew the elders had warned, "Do not eat donkey meat. It is cursed, it brings shame, and no child born of it will live a normal life." But hunger is a dangerous master. People whispered, and I stunned, but one woman's heart was restless. Her name was Nina. She was young, beautiful, and married for 5 years without a child. Each day she prayed to God, to her ancestors, and even to the earth beneath her feet, begging for a baby. But no child came. When she heard the hunter had donkey meat, her chest burned with desire. Maybe if I eat this meat, something will change, she thought. She remembered the warning, but the craving in her belly shouted louder than the wisdom in her head. That night, when everyone had gone to sleep, Nina sneaked into the hunter's hut. She begged him for a piece. "Please, just a little. I will pay." The hunter's hands shook as he handed her the meat. "Woman, this meat is forbidden. Do not say I gave it to you. If the elders find out, both of us will be finished." But her eyes glittered with hunger. She thanked him and carried the meat home in secret. Alone in her small kitchen, she cooked it with pepper, oil, and salt. As the meat boiled, the smell filled the room. It was rich, heavy, and different from anything she had ever known. She could almost feel her womb responding before she even tasted it. She licked her lips, her hands shaking, and when the pot was ready, she ate every piece in silence, like a thief. After she finished, she washed the pot quickly and buried the bones behind her house. Nobody saw her. Nobody knew. But the earth had already recorded it, and heaven had already written it down. The days turned into weeks, and something unusual began to happen in Nina's body. Her breast grew tender, her stomach began to swell, and morning sickness visited her every dawn. At first, she thought it was only her mind playing tricks, but when her period failed to come, her heart leapt with a joy she had never known. She touched her belly every night, whispering, "Finally, God has remembered me." The village women noticed. They came to greet her, clapping their hands and singing, "Nina is with child." After so many years, the shame is gone. Even her husband, who once avoided her bed in anger, now smiled like a boy. He built her a bigger kitchen, bought her wrappers, and walked beside her proudly in the market. To everyone else, this was a miracle. But inside Nina's chest, fear crept like a shadow. Because at night, she dreamt strange dreams. She saw donkeys chasing her through the forest, their eyes glowing like fire. She heard whispers calling her name from the buried bones. And when she touched her stomach, sometimes it felt as if something moved differently inside, not like a normal child. A kick would come, but it was too sharp, too strong, almost animal-like. She tried to tell herself it was only worry, but the signs became clearer. Her appetite grew strange. She craved raw things, unripe plantain, bitter herbs, even the smell of wet earth. Once, her husband found her near the backyard digging with her bare hands, as if searching for something. She laughed it off, but deep inside, she knew the seed she carried was not ordinary. One midnight, while the village slept, she woke up sweating. She swore she heard a donkey bray right inside her compound. She rushed outside with a lantern, but nothing was there, only silence. She turned to go back in, but then her eyes caught it, the very spot where she buried the donkey bones had been dug open. The bones were gone. The pregnancy grew heavier with each moon. Nina was strong, but something about her condition disturbed the midwives. They said her stomach was too sharp, the child moved too roughly, and her labor pains began before the time. She screamed for 3 days, rolling on the floor, sweat covering her body. The villagers gathered, praying, singing, and waiting. On the third night, thunder shook the sky. The midwife shouted, "Push, Nina, push." And at last, the child came out with a loud cry. Everyone clapped and praised God, but then silence fell. The midwife's hands trembled as she lifted the baby. The child was a girl, beautiful with round eyes and soft skin. But from her lower back, a long tail swung side to side like a whip. Gasps filled the room. Some women ran out screaming. Others crossed themselves, muttering, "Abomination." The husband stood frozen, staring at the tail, unable to speak. Nina, though weak from labor, stretched her arms, crying, "Give me my child. She is mine." She held the baby tight, ignoring the whispers. But even as she kissed her, she felt the weight of the curse pressing on them both. The elders came the next morning. They shook their heads, whispering among themselves. "We warned against the forbidden meat. A child born of it will never live like others." Some wanted the baby thrown away, but Nina's husband refused. "She is my blood. I will not kill her." So they named her Adana, meaning father's daughter. But in the shadows of that celebration, the whole village carried fear, for they knew this child's life would not be ordinary. Adana grew quickly. Her laughter was sweet, her eyes bright, and her spirit full of life. But the tail never disappeared. At first, they tied wrappers tightly around her waist, hoping to hide it. But as she grew older, the tail grew longer and stronger, twitching whenever she was angry or excited. Her parents tried to cut it when she was 5. A local healer came with sharp knives and herbs. They tied the child down as she cried, and the healer sliced. But the tail bled heavily, and no matter how deep he cut, it would not fall off. The wound only healed, and the tail remained. The healer shook his head. "This is not of man's doing. This is spiritual." In school, the other children noticed. They mocked her, calling her monkey girl and donkey's daughter. Some threw stones. She came home crying every day, begging her mother, "Please, remove it. I don't want to live like this." Nina would weep with her, knowing she had caused it all, but she could never confess the truth. As Adana grew into a teenager, her beauty began to shine. Men stared, women admired her face, but when the secret of her tail slipped out, mockery followed her like a shadow. She learned to walk fast, always hiding behind wrappers, but shame ate her soul daily. At night, she would sit by the river, staring at her reflection. She would whisper, "God, why me? What sin did I commit before birth?" But the river never answered. Only the sound of frogs croaking filled the silence. By the time Adana was 16, she had stopped going to the market freely. Whenever she walked by, children sang songs about her. "Tail, tail, shake it well." Women laughed behind their wrappers. Even men mocked her in secret. Only her parents tried to defend her, but even they avoided looking directly at her tail. She grew bitter. Anger became her companion. Once, when some girls tried to pull off her wrapper in public, her tail lashed out by itself, striking one of them so hard she fainted. The villagers screamed, calling her a witch. Rumors spread that she was half human, half beast. Her father tried to send her away to another town, but everywhere she went, whispers followed. She thought of running into the forest and never returning. But each time, she remembered her mother's tears and her father's quiet shame, and she stayed. At night, she still dreamt of donkeys, just like her mother once did. They circled her, their eyes burning, their voices whispering, "You carry the mark of disobedience. You cannot run." She would wake in sweat, clutching her wrapper, the tail heavy beneath it. One evening, after another day of mockery, she shouted at her mother, "What did you do to me? Why am I like this?" Nina fell on her knees, crying, but her lips were sealed. The truth sat like fire in her throat, but she could not speak it. Her parents decided it was time to seek deliverance. They carried her to a powerful prophet in a faraway town. The prophet looked at Adana once and shook his head. This child is carrying a covenant that cannot be broken by prayer alone. Something forbidden was eaten before she was born. Nina's heart almost burst, but she said nothing. The prophet prayed, shouted, and anointed her. They tied her down, fasting and praying for 7 days. Adana screamed as her body shook, her tail twisting violently like it wanted to break free. The church members gasped, but no matter how much oil was poured, the tail remained. When the deliverance failed, her father wept openly. He asked the prophet, "What must we do?" The prophet answered, "Her destiny is tied to her suffering. Unless the truth is confessed, the curse will continue to the next generation." Those words struck Nina like thunder. She could not sleep that night. Her dreams were full of the donkey bones rising from the earth, chasing her with laughter. She knew what she had to do, but fear locked her lips. Meanwhile, Adana began to lose hope. She stopped praying. She stopped speaking to her parents. She carried her tail like a prison chain, and bitterness swallowed her heart. Adana reached her 20s. Men admired her beauty, but whenever they discovered her secret, they ran away in fear. Suitors came and left. Engagements broke. One man shouted in the market, "Who will marry a donkey's daughter?" Laughter filled the air, and Adana's heart cracked. She returned home and locked herself in her room. Days passed. She refused to eat. Her mother knocked, begged, and cried, but she said nothing. When she finally came out, her eyes were red. "Mother, I will never marry. I will never have children. I will die like this." Nina wept. She wanted to confess, to free her daughter from the curse, but shame held her prisoner. If the village knew she had eaten donkey meat, she would be disgraced forever. So she chose silence. One night, Adana stood by the river again, staring at her reflection. The moon shone on the water, and for the first time, she saw not herself but the face of a donkey staring back. She screamed and ran home, but the image haunted her. From that night, she stopped visiting the river. She feared what she might see next. At last, Nina's heart could no longer carry the weight. She fell ill, her body weakening. On her sickbed, she called Adana close. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "My child, forgive me. I am the reason you suffer. I ate the forbidden meat before you were born." Adana froze. The room spun around her. "What did you say?" Nina repeated it, weeping harder. She told her about the hunter, the cravings, the bones she buried. She confessed everything. At first, Adana wanted to scream, to curse her mother. But looking at the weak woman who had loved her all her life, her anger melted into grief. She wept bitterly, clutching her mother's hand. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me carry this pain alone?" Nina whispered, "I was ashamed. I thought I could hide it. But the earth remembers, and the womb does not forget." Her voice grew faint, her breath slowing. That night, she closed her eyes forever, leaving Adana with the truth at last. Adana buried her mother with tears that shook the ground. The villagers whispered again, but this time, their fear was mixed with pity. For the first time, Adana felt free from the unknown, but the tale was still there. After her mother's death, Adana changed. She no longer hid as much. She no longer begged for the tale to disappear. Instead, she carried it with pride, wrapping it but never denying it. Some mocked her still, but others began to respect her courage. One day, a traveling storyteller came to the village. He saw Adana and listened to her story. He said, "You are carrying a lesson for the world. People will mock you, but your life is a warning against disobedience. Carry it well, and your pain will not be in vain." Those words touched her. She began to speak to young girls, warning them about choices, greed, and hidden sins. She told them, everything you do writes a story in your blood. Be careful what you eat, what you take, and what you hide. Slowly, people stopped mocking her. They came to her for advice, even calling her Mother of Wisdom. She never married, never bore children, but she raised many daughters through her counsel. Her father, though still heavy with shame, finally looked at her with pride. You have turned your curse into a lantern for others. Adana lived long, carrying her tail to the end of her days. She never cut it off, for it refused to be broken. But she carried it as a mark, a reminder of her mother's mistake and her own strength. When she was old, the children of the village gathered around her. They begged, "Grandmother, tell us your story again." She would smile and say, "Never eat what is forbidden. Never let hunger blind you. For every choice has a shadow, and every shadow follows your bloodline." Her words spread across towns and villages. People told her story around fires, warning their children never to take lightly what the elders forbid. The tale of the woman with the tail became a living proverb. And when Adana finally died, the villagers buried her with respect. Some swore they saw a donkey standing by her grave that night, crying like a human before disappearing into the forest. The earth closed over her, but her story lived on. And for generations, children grew up repeating the warning, the womb does not forget. The earth does not forget. What you eat today may become the seed of your tomorrow.